and Sindroro Unios, and Kir Persis.
3, 2, 1, action!
One wide, please. One sound.
John's rebirth was a really big thing. I knew it was going to be a big thing for the audience. It was a big thing to shoot.
It's not a fait accompli before we start with it. It's Davos going in and persuading or requesting that Melisandre try and do something.
There's certainly nothing to lose at this point, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. I think for Melisandre's part, if she could do this thing, it would somehow serve as some small justification for all the horror that she's precipitated.
I don't think Melisandre thinks she can do anything. She's completely defeated. She's completely lost it. She's completely confused.
And to see her hit rock bottom and to really have her big crisis of faith that maybe she's not favored by the Lord of Light. She only has the powers that he grants her.
You know, you think when Melisandre comes in, okay, well, she's going to do it, and that's going to be the end of it. But, you know, she comes in, she does it, and she fails, and we think that she's failed. And then everybody leaves the room, and then the moment happens, and we see that, in fact, she hasn't failed. So I think that surprise is really great. For me as a filmmaker, building that in, that tension, anticipation, feeling of failure that's not going to work, and then, oh, it did work. All of that, how to build that, was very interesting to me.
So, Kit,
Yeah.
do another one a little smaller.
A little smaller. Okay.
Yeah, same vibe, but
Yeah.
great.
You know, we tried a few different things. I mean, it was always my feeling that, you know, coming back to life, it should be like he's taking this huge breath. It's almost like coming up from underwater.
The thing it's most reminiscent of is birth, and the reaction of a infant upon being born is not, you know, smiles and laughter. It's screaming and bawling and what is this place? I was so warm and comfortable and everything was peaceful, and now you've pulled me into the cold, bright world, and now who knows what's gonna happen. For a relatively short fight, the storming Castle Black, it took quite a few days to get it right. It's amazingly complex.
Castle Black is always a challenging location, but a great one at the same time.
Bang! Bang! Crash! Flames coming in!
And it's partly because you're dealing with a lot of elements, you know, snow and extras, and in this case, 1-1.
Once you come in, all the enemy above the cameras here and over here, okay? All right, here you go.
Fortunately for us, shooting 1-1 is a really joyful experience because of the suit performer, Ian White, who plays 1-1.
Action!
We wanted a large performer because somebody who would be 14 feet tall would have more weight and mass to move around, and a person who's a normal size would have a very difficult time pulling that off.
Ian, don't forget not to come this way and then go round into it.
So working with someone who is 7'2", who with his makeup on goes up another few inches, and then is also an actor and is also a physical performer, puts us in a very good spot.
Can we do that again? First, we get storyboards from the director, or he gives us a verbal direction. And then we go into previs, and we work out cameras and animations. Then we show it to the director, he gives us notes on it. Then we show it to Dan and David, and they give us notes on it. And then we have a good animatic version of that final shot. You know, obviously it looks like a video game, but we know what we're going for and how we want it to look at the end of the day.
Probably my favourite scene of the season this year for me has been the aging of Melisandre. It was really beautifully shot. We had Carice in her prosthetic makeup who they would shoot her performance, but then they would shoot it with her double Sheila, who was this elderly lady who would do exactly the same motions as Carice.
And we're also seeing her facing the reality of who and what she really is, which is somebody who is not young and beautiful, but somebody who's been here for a very, very long time. Her appearance is a lie, just as the Lord of Light's supposed promises to her and messages to her were lies, or at least not what she thought they were.
Oh my God, that was a tough one. That was my last day of shooting, actually. And I think for Patrick and Pilou, the two actors, Balon and Euron, it was a tough one.
Let me pass.
You know, we were shooting outside in November in Belfast at night, all night long, in, you know, lashing rain on this set that's, I don't know, 15 feet off the ground and green screen.
I heard you lost your mind during a storm on the Jade Sea.
Every time I sent them out there for another take, I was like, oh.
I am the storm, brother.
Kind of sets its own scene because it's described as a rope bridge between two towers of pike. So you need one tower, another tower, a rope bridge joining. What we had to bring to it was an awful lot. The bridge had to be secured. It had to be safe enough to have actors working on there, to have people being thrown off there, for a camera crew to work in amongst it. It needed rain, it needed wind, it needed lights. There was a lot of equipment that needs to go around this thing.
You know, it's a really great scene. I think they knew it was going to be a great scene, so they were excited about that. But yeah, it was challenging.
Camera, action.
Seeing a dragon for the first time, he's always thought that they were just legend. And he's always had an obsession. In this season, we get to explore that even more, because now he has proof. And now his curiosity is too great not to find out more and see him again firsthand.
I'm friends with your mother.
Well, Dragon Daycare was a little daunting because last season we were in Croatia and we were shooting in this amazing location, the Diocletian Palace in Split. And it is this like huge vaulted room with pillars, and it's a stunning location and a fantastic place for the dragons to be held. And when I found out this year that I had an equally complex sequence, but we're not actually at the location, I thought, well, how is that even going to be possible? And then to the rescue comes Deb Riley, the production designer, and the VFX department, and then some good storyboarding and planning, and we made it work. And the sequence, I think, is fantastic. I really, really love it.
I'm here to help.
And amazingly, I don't think anyone would ever know that we weren't back in that location.
Don't eat the help.
So the area in Split, that had been well surveyed. So we had drawings of what was in Split. We had drawings of the stairs that we had to put in. So we had all the elements. We had a space here, and then again, working with visual effects, you know, how much do we build? I think we deemed that 15 foot was a good cutoff for us, and then visual effects were able to carry it on after that.
I think it really helps the scene in a way because it forces you into more darkness. It's a mystery exactly what it is you're going to be facing, or the fact that it's really just a couple of pillars and maybe a wall or two, and the rest of it's entirely done with visual effects. It makes it easier to play up the darkness, which in turn, I think, really improves the scene on a tonal level.
That one?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
With something like this, there's very little improv when you're shooting. You know, you really, really design it and you plan it. The only thing that really is kind of like unplanned is the performance in a way. And so with Peter, it was really about really kind of talking through what this moment means for him, because, you know, we know that Tyrion's been fascinated by dragons his entire life. So there's a kind of magical quality for him. But that's mixed with a lot of other things. It's awe, it's fear, it's sympathy, it's nostalgia. It's a million things. But Peter is so great, and the scene is so beautiful.
I mean, he's a kid in a candy store. It's terrifying. I mean, the fact that he can die at any moment, but it's too great of an opportunity for him to miss.
When my father told me the lost dragon had died a century ago, I cried myself to sleep that night.
They also have this kind of like almost human emotive quality, which I think comes as a surprise to him. And I think he's just amazed by this kind of awareness and knowingness and sensitivity that the dragons actually have. And then there's the added thing too in this particular scene, because the dragons are a little unwell. And so there's a kind of pathos in this whole situation. There's a beautiful, incredible beast, potentially incredibly powerful, but they are now diminished because they've been held in captivity and haven't been treated properly.
Action. Lift your legs up, please, gents. Cuando digamos acción, todos vendréis corriendo hacia acá.
The cool thing about these two episodes is that they are very much thematically linked, in that they deal with rebirth. John comes back into the world naked, as if a baby, at Castle Black in the cold. And Danny, naked, as if a child, but merging through fire and ice. And I did a lot of visual research. I looked at a lot of Renaissance paintings dealing with the resurrection. And my favorite painter is Caravaggio. Myself and the DP sat down and we talked about how can we emulate that feeling. That's great. So let me just see this action here. Okay, Kit, ready? And action.
Kit talked to us about the need for him to really feel what it feels like to remember your own death and how existentially terrifying that is.
I think I referred to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book on death and dying. And I said, why don't we take that in reverse? Because there's stages of disbelief and bargaining and acceptance. And I said, so let's start there. You wake up and some of the pieces are missing and you don't know where you are. And it becomes a series of discoveries. Where am I? Oh, well, I think I know where I am, and why am I naked? Then he looks down to discover that he has all these wounds. And then all of a sudden the memories start flooding back and panic ensues. So it really becomes sort of, how does John deal with what's happened?
He's been dead, and that's an experience that no one can understand unless it's happened to you, which means no one can understand.
What did you see?
Nothing. Nothing at all.
We go through the entire scene. He walks over to the rope, starts to lift the sword. We focused on how John would deal with the execution of Ollie.
It all comes back to Ned Stark, you know, the man who passes the sentence, swings the sword. I mean, it's the Northern ethos. John really doesn't want to do this. I mean, the justice of it is clear. I mean, these men assassinated the Lord Commander. They need to be executed, but he's the one who passed the sentence, and he's got to swing the sword.
Yeah, we did really drop them. It's always kind of chilling because your initial reaction as an audience is visceral. You know, they're in these harnesses that drop, and it is a little bit of a shock to the system.
You have to loosen this off. Yeah. Loosen the actual dressing rope.
The first time feeling that drop and the noise of the barrels being pulled back is terrifying when you're standing above it. It feels so real, and that obviously adds to the ability to act terrified during the scene.
Zafra Tower, which is in Guadalajara, Spain, it feels magical.
It almost looks surreal. I want everybody to know that it's real and that visual effects didn't do anything to it.
I remember sitting there on set reading on the history of this building, the way it was built against the Moors, and then the Moors took it, and then it was used in Spaniards fighting Spaniards, and all this brutal and bloody Thronesy history that was taking place right on the spot we were standing. Fights like the fight we were watching were happening probably where we were shooting this very fight.
Certainly they've done a lot of sword fights in this series. The question was, how would I make it different? I stumbled upon a Sergio Leone movie called Once Upon a Time in the West. And it's all about creating tension through anticipation of what's to come. And I thought, That's the key to this. You would see this tower and horses on a plain, and then you would start to hear the sound of a stone on a blade of a broadsword. It would sort of sync in rhythms with a horse's hooves, and then you would see these powerful horse's hooves. And then you would cut to a gleaming knight's helmet. And little by little, tease the audience into a sense that a mythic event is about to happen.
And now it begins. Now it ends.
David and Dan wanted the flashiest swordsman in the whole of the Game of Thrones world.
Sir Arthur Dayne is a legendary member of the Kingsguard under the Mad King, and reputed by many to be the greatest sword fighter in the history of the Seven Kingdoms.
He has two swords. He's got his own traditional sword, and he's also got the Dawn, which is basically his pride and joy, which is this sort of white blade.
It was really tricky to choreograph and execute and film a very complicated sword fight and make all of the cuts and all of the parries and all of the defenses and all of the kills look real and convincing while being flashed.
He stabbed him in the back.
The second part of it that made it a little trickier was that it is part of Bran's vision.
How does a boy having a dream, how does he interact in a landscape that he's not really meant to be there?
Father! Figuring out clever ways of transitioning the points of view and bringing Bran and the Three-Eyed Raven into the story and then taking them out so that each had its own specific linear narrative.
All of Dany's story, the vast majority of it was shot in the exterior world in Almeria, out in Spain. We had the gates of Dothrak were down there. The exterior of the village, as well as the exterior of the temple. And then we built the interior of it back here in the car park in Belfast.
They're going to bring me to face Dothrak, and there's an argument that happens as to what they will do with me. My fate is being decided.
What happens is you sit down with these previous artists and you kind of pitch your vision for the sequence. And you present them with storyboards. You say, okay, well, we're going to burn the temple down from this angle, and I sort of want it to look like this and this. And then what's determined is how you approach that from standpoint, because the building's on fire, right? You can only put people in a certain proximity to that. So you have to shoot those as separate elements. So but you bring green screens in and green screens out. It ends up being so many different elements that you have to sort of keep your fingers crossed that what you end up with will be what you had envisioned in the prep process.
And I'm starting at this one.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Sure.
One of the big things that Dan Sackheim was really concerned about when he came to shoot the interior was how is it that this quite small girl is able to set this whole building on fire while she has 21 men around her.
So the notion I came up with was to topple these braziers to create an impenetrable line.
And then the matting would catch light, and then that would, travel up the walls, and then that would get to the roof.
Until she's sealed the temple and they can't get out. She's sort of trapping them all in this fiery tomb.
The interior burning was scary, genuinely frightening, where I was like, oh, I'm not fireproof, whoops. I forgot about that one.
When you light for fire, you need a lot of light to balance with the firelight. For the exterior, the way I approached it, I had the moonlight ambient light a little bit higher than I would usually.
What I wanted to do is have this building that had lots of combustible stuff on it, so when it burned for real. I wanted to use this certain approach, which is like a liquid propane. Very explosive, very difficult, but incredibly aggressive, and looks beautiful when it's burning. And with the liquid propane coming through, makes it look like an inferno, like a proper inferno.
We meticulously planned out every step of that process. We knew what we were starting with a bunch of green screen of the people watching it. We knew then we were going to go to the burning. We had plotted out where every single camera needed to go and which camera would be shooting, you know, what action at what time.
It's kind of like a little bit of a carnival atmosphere where everyone, you know, hundreds of extras and hundreds of crew members and the cast and the director and ambassador to Spain was there, and all of us just standing there watching the world's biggest bonfire.
They spent over 2 months building a temple that we burned to the ground in 2.5 minutes.
What's it like to watch something that we build burn? I think everybody finds that really satisfying. I don't think anybody at all is sentimental about it. We all enjoy that for what it is. That's part of the fun of the job.
The sequence when the White Walkers and the Whites attack the cave of the Three-Eyed Raven was an incredibly complicated sequence to figure out.
I knew that it was going to be a lot of stunts, a lot of CGI. How were we going to do it?
It's all the different departments coming together to create this nightmare scenario. So you've got the stunt team with the various fights. You've got the special effects team with the fires. You've got the visual effects with the Whites crawling on the ceiling.
It's a lot of different elements in play.
My goal was to make it realistic, make it terrifying, and make Hodor's sacrifice incredibly moving.
The Three-Eyed Raven Cave we first established at the end of season 4. It was very difficult to shoot in, but we only had a 2-day shoot.
It had been designed for, you know, the actors to escape to, and then we cut away, so it wasn't very stunt friendly at all. So we kind of had to sort of pull it all apart, create new tunnels.
And for this year, we had to have a secret exit for the cave just to follow the ending of that episode and the storyline that goes with that.
The children of the forest are basically in a very thin prosthetic, so we had to try and make the floor a bit friendlier for that, because obviously we're gonna kill them and throw them on the floor and things like that. But it's very small. It was very clubby filming in there. It was a bit of a mission.
Arrow!
If there's going to be an actor going by an explosion at night, we better see the effect of that light on him. The children of the forest have these round grenades that have been established in the show. They had designed these flat panels of light that the actors and extras would walk by, and explosion 1, and the light would light up from the ground. So the interactive light would hit. Then we did a pass with just the explosions. Then we did a pass with just them and stunt guys reacting. We shot many cold nights out of Magamorn to do all that stuff.
When we do explosions inside a small contained set, you've always got to worry about air expansion. We're working with this system that's actually igniting dust. What we ended up using was cork dust and charcoal dust, fired out of an air mortar in front of a flame, ignites into a lovely fireball. And it was off a Leaf's grenade explosion in the tunnel. It's such a confined little space. You do your explosion passes, there's no one there.
Action!
And then you do your passes where you've got people there, but they need to have interaction.
Go!
You put that shot and then the previous shot of explosion, and you've got everything you need.
At any one time during the cave, we had so many characters which were going to be in prosthetics. We had the Night King, 3 White Walkers, 6 Children of the Forest, including the hero Leaf, and countless Whites.
Anytime we create a creature is very difficult.
The Children of the Forest are fully covered from head to toe. They're glued completely into these prosthetics all over their body.
It took so long to get the Children of the Forest in their brilliant makeup and costumes. It was really challenging.
If I were to do a full body prosthetic, I'll get picked up at midnight
and then I'll be on set by 10 a.m. So it takes about 9-10 hours. I didn't realize it's going to result to 9.5 hours of makeup.
It is an extraordinary thing that we ask of them, but then you see them all made up and it's like, okay, that was worth it. They're, you know, they're incredible.
Ready? Here we go. Action!
The cave sequence this year is kind of like a chase sequence. We've got Hodor and Mira and Bran on the run through the escape tunnel. They're being chased by skeletal and half-dead whites. And not only on the ground, they're also being chased on the ceiling.
There's an image that Dan and David and Jack were very, very keen on, but just to get it as crazy and as terrifying as we could, the whites are not only running on the floor, but they're crawling on the walls, they're crawling on the ceiling. So we worked with the art department to build an inverted walls and ceiling section of the tunnel.
It took a lot of interdepartmental planning to get that right.
We had to leave room with green screen when we were shooting, frame-wise, to have them crawling on the ceiling.
Our great stunt team put their heads together on how to suspend the white stunt performers. So it's a bungee rig. They can cross over each other. They can pile onto each other.
They're going to be everywhere. That's something that's going to end up, I hope, being really creepy.
There's a door between these whites and between Mira and Bran getting away. That's when I'm told to hold the door, which turns into Hodor, and which is like a genius.
George told us about this, that hold the door was the origin of the name Hodor.
And I just remember Dan and I looking at each other when he said that, just being like, holy shit.
The intensity of the moment for Hodor, his own death moment, finding its way back through time, is short-circuiting young Willis and turning him into Hodor.
It's one of those things that, you know, didn't ever occur to me before he told us that, and then it all makes sense.
We just thought that was a really, really cool, kind of heartbreaking idea.
The big climactic cave sequence was hugely complex, and although it's very scary that this really terrifying thing is happening to our characters, at the end of the day, I think the emotion and what we're experiencing is hopefully going to be the shock that people will stay with.
Oh, it's mortifying. It's so sad.
I had the call. I knew what was going to happen to Hodor, but when I got the script, it was a really difficult scene to read.
Hodor was just, as we know, a totally normal kid who was then sort of screwed over by Bran. It's going to break people's hearts.
When I first read the script and I read the section about Hodor and how he got his name and what happens, that was a really cool and totally unexpected thing for me. I didn't think that we'd ever even find out.
It's definitely a sad moment, but I like what he's done, that he sacrificed himself for his friends. It feels very true to Hodor for me, but it's really sad.
That's a series wrap shot for Mr. Hodor.
Thank you, guys.
This episode, episode 5, is really complicated editorially.
Even though some of those images flash by in just a fraction of a second, each of them was very carefully chosen. And the Mad King was probably the most dramatic of those, because we've been hearing about the Mad King from the very beginning of the show, but he's never appeared on screen before. And shooting it, you know, spending a lot of time on what ended up being maybe like a second and a half, couple of seconds of screen time.
I shot a lot of transitions, you know, off Bran's hand holding the vine, the transatlantic route that gets him to wherever he goes.
It hints at this whole sort of almost paradoxical time intervention that Bran can appear to do, for better or worse.
When I was doing the Arctic Wasteland, and I looked at that Night King in that makeup on his horse against that snowy, rocky landscape, I went, wow, this is really gonna be fucking awesome.
After we'd read like episode 5 and the huge sequence in the cave, we realized that logistically it was going to be a huge challenge. We had the Night King, 3 White Walkers, 6 Children of the Forest, and countless Whites.
When you're talking about 8 hours of makeup and them having to come in at 1 in the morning to start their makeup to be on the set.
I mean, it is an extraordinary thing that we ask of them, but then you see them all made up, and it's like, okay, that was worth it. They're, you know, they're incredible.
All right, one more.
So on a normal day, so if I were to do a full body prosthetic, I'll get picked up at midnight, and then I'll be on set by 10 a.m. So it takes about 9-10 hours.
A design process for something like the characters like the Children of the Forest, it's quite a big procedure. We were looking at very earthy kind of references and tree barks and leaves, branches, the color palette as well being very green and ochres and browns. And it's very much a kind of a camouflagey sort of palette as well.
These lenses that we wear, they like cover half of our eyeballs. You have to look really fierce and you have to like give it this eye thing. It's such an epic journey just to get on set.
The Lion and the Rose are one. I pledge undying love.
The theater stuff was really fun for me to read, and I knew it was going to be a blast to work with the actors and the designers and create that. And to actually figure out with Deborah Riley, our brilliant production designer, and the team, how do we base the look of this play in the universe of Game of Thrones, and what would be appropriate then, and still make it a little bit larger than life, a little ridiculous without being Saturday Night Live.
Shut up, you swine! It made sense that they would be talking about what the people at the center of Westeros were doing. It made sense that they would know who Cersei was, who Joffrey was, who Tyrion was. It made sense that they would get it completely wrong.
The theatre scene is just, it seems so joyous. It's something that is so different to the rest of the show. And we could use colour. Blues next to yellows, next to greens, next to reds. It uses comedy.
What's that mean?
The whole feel of it is so different to everything else that it was an opportunity to really stretch our wings in another direction.
So we're sort of following the camera.
So we're following the camera and then we're looking through here to there.
That sequence, conceptually, it was complex. Execution-wise, it was complex.
No rehearsal.
And in terms of the acting, it was complex.
Get Bran and run.
The Children of the Forest have these round grenades that have been established in the show. And when they throw them, they ignite and light up in a certain way, and when they hit the ground, they explode. We had to orchestrate with our 100 extras as they were walking where the choreography of explosion 1 would be here, explosion 2 would be here, explosion 3 would be there, the Night King proceeds. Jonathan Freeman, my brilliant DP, is very much about interactive light. And if there's going to be an actor going by an explosion at night, we better see the effect of that light on him. Our special effects team, they had designed these flat panels of light that the actors and extras would walk by, and the light would light up from the ground, so the interactive light would hit. Then we did a pass with just the explosions. And now they're going to shoot some guys getting pulled on wire against green screen. So to make those images feel real, it takes a lot of planning, a lot of prevising, and practical shooting, and a lot of CGI. Making that with a bunch of people that are this talented, that to me is a real blessing.
All right.
The whites in the cave, a lot of them are going to be CG, or what we call these sort of green screen whites. There's sort of a person performing it, but then we replace their arms and legs with CG pieces. On top of that, we have some of the whites crawling on the ceiling, which has to be shot in a completely different setup. It's the ceiling, but we're going to shoot it upside down, so guys are going to actually crawl on the floor, and then we're going to turn the footage upside down, so it makes it look like they're crawling on the ceiling.
We're doing a lot of stuff in a tunnel, which we just run up and down, which we've been doing for about 4 days now, running up and down this tunnel. Excellent! So there's such tension and the stakes are so high. What are you doing? Go!
We will build in horror and fright and action, always with the emotional through line of, oh my God, they've got to get out of there. I care desperately that they get out of there.
Gets in the middle, the whites converge around her and she blows them up.
Oh my God, Leaf is sacrificing herself for the greater good and for her friends to escape. Oh my God, no, not Hodor.
Stop the wind and snow.
My goal was to make it realistic, make it terrifying, and at the end of the day, with Hodor, make it his sacrifice incredibly moving.
All right, Christian, you're breathing heavy. You've been running. And action. Turn around. And your friends say, hold the door.
Hold the door.
And look at that axe. And try to hold it. Hold it. Keep going. Fill the holes. Keep going. Struggle. Open your eyes. Open your eyes. And look. And they're all over you. And cut. I liked that he sacrificed himself for his friends. Feels very true to Hodor for me. And I'm just thankful I got so far. You know, with so many people dying every year.
That's a series wrap shot for Mr. Hodor.
But it's really sad.
Thank you, guys.
That scene with Mira dragging and the blizzard, she's like Diane Keaton in Reds crossing the frozen tundra, which was my image. I said, I really want it so blizzardy and cold, and this little girl and this sled, and she finally just breaks down. She can't do it anymore.
Today is about saving Bran, essentially, saving the Prophet.
One more hustle, guys.
Once you've taken your hit, you're on your back, you've rolled over, we'll probably have about 4 seconds of you doing that if you're still acting, and then we'll come in and put you out.
3, 2, 1, action!
Wire work is ways of motivating people through the air or assisting them to jump down off something or to safety them or to propel them through a space.
Nothing is going to get between that kid and me. Because I'm one bad motherfucker.
Come with me. Seeing his uncle again and seeing that comforting presence really serves to anchor him going forward.
Uncle Benji. They've got this weird sort of mystical connection. They're both figures who aren't clearly just a regular warrior or normal human.
You are the three-eyed raven, no?
We know what we've got to do.
I didn't have time to learn. I can't control anything.
There's an element of mystery around Bran's future. This is happening much, much more rapidly than he thought it was going to happen, and he doesn't really know what it all means. He doesn't know what to make of it all.
He will find his way to the world of men. When he does, you will be ready.
First of all, this 747 insane dragonflies in, which CGI will make great. It's massive, and it goes above them and then circles around and lands, and dust flies. And I think it was one of my ADs that said, you know, the horses can be stirring. Having the horses active in the scene charged the scene with a certain amount of chaos and energy.
I have a new book. Woo! Exciting. He's an electric, doing what it wants kind of buck. I just literally get to react to what they're doing.
She was amazing. At the end of the scene, you should be somewhat roused by her and a little horrified. She's not Hitler at Nuremberg, but she's got the power.
Why don't you drink? Have a drink with me.
Oi, you're at the back.
In all my days, I've never seen a man handle an axe like that. How many men did it take to cut you down?
Just one.
Whoa! That must have been some kind of monster.
He was a woman.
The responsibility of resurrecting the Hound in episode 7 was both, oh my God, how completely amazing, and oh my God, how completely terrifying.
He's glad to be alive. He's survived a near-death experience. It's not that he's suddenly gone totally religious, but he feels like he can help out the guy that's helped him.
Let's go once again from the top, guys.
He finds this man in Ian McShane's character who he can really relate to.
Gentlemen?
I'm like a leader of this sort of group of people who don't believe in violence anymore. So obviously I'm not going to last more than one episode, which...
How many men did you say it took to cut you down?
Just one.
Rory's actually really good at chopping wood in real life. Didn't need any stunt doubles, didn't need any kind of effects. It's just him there with an axe, which is great. You know, it just makes it that much more believable.
There's something greater than us. And whatever it is, it's got plans for Sandor Clegane.
The Hound does, I think, allow himself on some level some hope that actually maybe there is a different way forward for him, which of course at the end of episode 7 we find out actually there isn't.
River Run was initially a small drawing back in season 3 that you saw in the distance as part of a matte painting. And then we had to obviously build it this year.
There was a certain romance that seemed to be attached to River Run. We also liked the idea of making it a little bit more fairy tale. You know, the way we could play with turrets, the way we could play with this castle surrounded by water.
That actually bridges sort of 2 rivers. And, you know, then they're able to flood the 3rd river so that then it can become a complete island and stand alone at the same time as being something sort of new and exotic. So we were looking to architecture of sort of Middle Europe, French in particular.
I was worried about it. I thought, how are we going to use an existing castle? How are we going to get the drawbridge as a CGI element or a model element? And then I got to Ireland and realized they'd built it all with a huge working drawbridge.
We built the facade of the building. We built the interior of that building. And then we were able to use the farmer's field opposite to create the big siege camp. So it ended up being a massive project from beginning to end.
The great thrill for us was River Run blurs the boundaries between set design and civil engineering.
Because we actually built a working drawbridge. How many people get to do that? It's amazing.
It just looks so great, you know, and there's a big difference between having a kind of background VFX bridge that doesn't really play in and then having an actual winched drawbridge that opens, and just beautiful. So hats off to the production department.
Have a drink with me. You, what's your excuse?
Tyrion has a capacity of getting along with most people, but his own family.
Three lords walk into a tavern.
You gotta lighten up the day with the sense of humor.
You know, Tyrion is known for his ability to talk and to converse and be charming. And he's faced with two people who are just there to do a job.
Anyone not drinking is disrespecting our queen.
So Peter just went on, it's like a stand-up comic, you know. We'd do the words of the scene and then Peter would just keep going on messing around and that would make the actors laugh. And we would keep the cameras running so we would get reactions that felt real because they were real.
Tell me a joke, Miss Sandy of Nott.
I do not know any jokes.
Grey Worm.
Grey Worm sees Tyrion a little bit as like that guy at work who you're constantly made to interact with, but you're sort of like, you're really annoying, but I have to respect you because you are my superior.
I mean, Grey Worm is a hard nut to crack, but he manages to. And Missandei's a bit easier. I did save her life at the end of season 5.
And Sullied never drink.
Why not?
Rules.
Who made these rules? Your former masters? Miserable old sacks of shit wouldn't...
Fucking hell. Sorry, you step away from this language for...
Looks like a siege, my lady.
You have a keen military mind, Pod.
Riverrun is deceptive. I think if one took one's eye off it, you could end up just trying to shoot a siege.
As long as I'm standing, the war is not over.
All the characters that are involved in that whole piece are just extraordinarily desperate in their own ways. It is that synthesis of the epic and the intimate that is so beguiling.
What the hell are you doing here?
I've come for the Blackfish.
You're welcome to have him.
The scene between Jaime and Brienne, it is the most reluctant love story in history. They love each other and they hate that they love each other.
There is that complication.
They have a genuine understanding of each other, and I think that in many ways she gets him on a level that very few other people get him.
Honor compels me to fight for Sansa's kin.
Of course it does.
To fight you.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that.
That tacit understanding that it can never be anything, not it wants it to be anything, but it's there.
Lord Edmure.
In the tent with Tobias's character, Lord Edmure, and Sir Jaime, I think is an exquisitely written scene. So layered. David and Dan at their subtextual best, and two actors at the top of their game.
How do you tell yourself that you're decent? After everything that you've done?
The actors are so smart and they know their characters so well. I'd love to make myself sound cleverer than I am, but it's like not getting in the way, honestly.
I love Cersei. And if I have to slaughter every Tully who ever lived to get back to her, that's what I'll do.
Arya's jump over the balcony, she was a wire assisted, but she did it for real. It's around about 14 feet. And there is a map there, but you won't be able to see it.
The kind of climax of episode 8 is this foot chase, which I think was described on the script as, you know, the greatest foot chase in cinematic history or something like that. So no pressure on the director.
It was so much fun to shoot as well, because you're in Spain and you're in these streets that really look that way. There wasn't there was dressing, but there wasn't a lot of recreation.
I'm so thrilled that I've got the opportunity to do these sort of things. It starts out as a very calculated, kind of Bourne identity sort of foot chase and turns into just pure scrambling and pain and desperation.
And so I devoured every foot chase in the history of cinema. But trying to take from that something that would fit into the blueprint of the Game of Thrones, you know, visual style, which is not necessarily the same kind of kinetic handheld feel that you find in many contemporary thrillers. It's a much more classic frame.
Nice to see Arya meeting her match, because no one likes a character that's far too cocky, and that's what Arya's become, and so it's wonderful to see her really, really struggle.
Everything hinged from finding this very lovely steep stairwell and thinking, wouldn't it be great if she leapt off that and then tumbled down all the stairs? I had this image in my head that I wanted lots of oranges rolling down, which I'm not quite sure where that comes from, but it looked pretty.
All the while, the waif is just ploughing through like a Terminator. And we wanted the audience to watch it and be like, you idiot! Now you're going to just leak blood to wherever you're going to go and hide. Again, with Arya, it's very calculated.
That the character had actually been extraordinarily cunning in the way that she'd baited and led this character to her and outwitted the waif.
As soon as we wrote episode 9, we knew that it was going to have to operate on a scale that we'd never operated before.
We'd had a number of nighttime battles, we've had a number of sieges, but this is the first pitched battle, or at least the first large pitched battle. And so it was something different for us.
All of it is action with almost no dialogue and lots of horses and many extras and a giant.
The amount of supporting artists and the size of the crew, how many cameras they've got going, the magnitude of all the sets and everything. It's unbelievable.
It was hard. It was a long, long slog.
Luckily, we got Miguel Sapochnik back, who was our maestro from Hard Home in season 5.
That was basically a massacre. This is a battle. This is the story of a battle. We've never done that before.
They really wanted to kind of get into the mindset of what it would be like to be in a battle like that.
It was fluid all the way through. It morphed, it changed. But the most important thing all the way through is it can't just be a battle. If it's just a battle, the audience don't have stakes in it. You have to be following someone, and we decide to follow Jon. Ramsay's weapon all the way through is antagonizing people, drawing them into a trap, and Jon completely falls for it.
He doesn't account for Ramsay's gifts at psychological manipulation, which Sansa warns him about.
He's kind of thought, this guy is going to do something stupid and honourable because he's not going to be able to control himself, so I'll shoot his brother with a bow and arrow.
There's no way he can't gallop towards his brother, who is being shot at with arrows, and try and save him. So he falls into that trap.
But he's waited until Jon Snow is within Archer's range so that they can start shooting him immediately.
He's seen his brother be killed, so he falls into the next trap of galloping towards Ramsay. Every step of the way does exactly what he wants him to do.
Probably my favorite shot of the whole season is when we're behind Jon Snow and he sees that cavalry wall galloping towards him. And part of the reason it's such a great shot is it's all real. That's 40 horses charging full speed at Kit Harington.
Until the last minute, I was stood there facing off against this cavalry charge, which is really scary. We're a bit annoyed because I think everyone's going to think it was CGI, and it wasn't.
Camilla, our horse mistress, kept asking every year. She said, give me some more stuff to do. Like, this year was boring. It's just people trotting from here to there on their horses. So finally we gave her enough to do.
I read the outline and went, wow, okay, this is adventurous. How are we going to deal with this? It's the biggest amount of horse requirement I've ever had on Game of Thrones. We flew over in May to kind of start discussing how we were going to prep it, how many horses we were going to use. We decided on 80 in the end. So when we first see both armies, we'll use 80 on the Stark side, and then we use 80 on the Boltons, so we're using the maximum. Then when we start to clash, we'll split it in half.
When we had horses charging past me, those are all real horses.
I obviously work very closely with Rowley, putting it all together. And we make channels so it looks like they're clashing, but they're not. The horses are actually just passing through, like 2-foot channels so they can clear out.
We are going to make that look as close as possible to a collision without actually colliding the horses. So in very tight formation, we'll have those guys cross and they will pull the horses as they cross through. We're falling them onto very thick falling beds so we don't injure the horses or injure the guys, but we're going to try and make that something that's not really been done before. You want it to feel crowded and mayhem and like, anything can happen anytime, but I really don't want anything to happen anytime. I want what we plan to happen and it look really cool and let's not hurt anybody.
get across the field and follow the horses at the speed at which they're moving, and horses move really, really fast, you need a special rig, and the Russian arm is just such a fun machine to work with, and it gives you such dynamic shots.
It's basically a camera tracking vehicle. It's a remote control arm that sits on a Land Rover in our case.
Throughout the Battle of the Bastards, we had a number of tracking vehicles, one of which was the Vampire Bat with the Russian arm on it, on a muddy, slippery field over about 500 or 600 yards with very fast horses. That was the vehicle to chase them properly and get the results we wanted. They worked very well. The results were amazing.
Go! Go! Follow your commander!
You've got two giant armies that are opposing one another. You know you're not going to have more than a few hundred extras on one side or the other, so you've got a lot of crowd replication.
We had a lot of cavalry, a lot of infantry. 1-1, the giant is involved. Most of it would be photographed, but it also needed a lot of digital enhancement.
You've got things happening that you can't shoot in any real way. You've got a giant punching out a horse. We shoot horses falling and charging toward one another that we can use as elements, but we start to get into complex areas that we haven't really broken ground with on the series before, where it is fun and exciting, but also very challenging.
The Battle of the Bastards becomes incredibly compact. All these combatants forced into this incredibly tight space on the battlefield, partly crammed in by bodies.
You've got horses, you've got, men of either side just piled up in this massive heap.
The body pile was absolutely enormous in terms of its scale and ambition. All of those prop bodies had to be dressed in the appropriate uniforms. We had to have the shields and the flags. You then need to dress the horses in their saddlery. You need to make sure that the correct sigil is on the horse. Even though I know that all of these bodies are fake, it was deeply moving.
It's pretty grim, it's very brutal actually to look at. I've never seen that before, ever.
It comes from reading real accounts of these various battles, both medieval and even more modern ones. You read accounts of battles in the Civil War where the bodies were piled so thick it actually became an obstruction on the battlefield.
I think what I was finding throughout filming this was moments of giving up. And the first moment we found that was when the crush starts happening and he just stops for a moment. And then he tries to fight his way back and he gets pushed over, he gets trampled.
John is almost literally buried alive beneath the bodies.
He was being almost killed by his own men, not on purpose, but just in this wave of fear that kind of overcomes everyone as they try to get out of the way of this incoming wall of shields.
And then something drives him to fight up. And that moment where it comes up and he gasps for breath, he's reborn again in a way.
Winterfell's a place that really means so much in the context of the show, and the episode is really about bringing things home. The final act takes place in the Winterfell courtyard, and it ultimately boils down to Jon against Ramsay and Sansa against Ramsay.
Always wanted to do a scene with Jon Snow. It's really nice to get to sort of have the two bastards there together, facing off.
It's a horrible moment when you see your hero go a bit too far.
The only direction I gave to Kit was he's not a human anymore. He doesn't feel any sympathy, empathy for this guy. We actually spent an entire day, 10 hours, with Kit on top of Ewan, beating him. And I just shot it from every single angle I possibly could.
And what we wanted to try and get with that was that he's just kneading bread. He's just flattening this person's face, and that's what's changed in Jon for me. A monster has risen in him a bit, which I think should be unsettling for the viewers.
There's nothing he wants more than to beat Ramsay to death with his own fists, and then he sees his sister.
I think John then realizes, you know, as he's about to kill him, he's on the verge of death. He realizes this is your fight, this is your guy to kill, because he understands what she's been through. Where is he?
It's a very justified ending so that Sansa has the power in the end.
Your house will disappear. Your name will disappear. All memory of you will disappear. It's such a strong moment for her because all her life she's been affected by these men who have just done such terrible things to her.
It's nice to get to do a final scene with Sophie after last season.
And this is the first moment that you actually hear her say, "This won't affect me and I'm stronger than that." It's my favorite scene.
Her walk away, that final shot, was so crucial, and just to get that little hint of a smile just right, I think we ended up making poor Sophie do it, 12 or 13 times in the middle of the night. It's not a big smile, it's just a little hint of a smile.
Sophie doesn't say very much, but I think
trying to capture the madness that this must have been. At any second could be the end of him. It's just a stray blade or a horse falling or a guy, sticking him in the back. And he's barely surviving. We've been choreographing action that should look like it's kicked off in the street. It should look like absolute lunacy. So he's trained the whole thing. It's all going to be him. We're not going to use a double for that. He's got lots of stuff to do.
You've got things happening that are rather kind of epic that you can't shoot in any real meaningful way. You've got a giant pulling a guy out of the crowd and smashing his head with his bare hand. You've got horses crashing into each other.
You can't run two horses together because you kill the horses. It became about marrying real horse falls with the digital world so that we could have a real horse take a fall and then we could digitally superimpose a second horse, which was a CGI horse that would seem to hit the real horse, causing it to fall in the first place.
You add a new level of danger in with horses. It's not just a fist fight.
We've got people getting slashed in the neck, we've got stomach slashes, we've got axes in heads, we've got all sorts.
The best way to describe Bob is every day they would bring all the extras on board and I would down to the set and I would send them back and say, more blood, more mud. And that's all I ever said, is more blood, more mud. And with Kit, it was more blood, more mud. That's all I was going for, is how dirty can we make this war?
I would like to put on record right now that I have had more shit thrown at me than any other actor on this show. I had so much crap on my face. I just wanted to finish by then. I was like, I've loved this, but let's just end. And that was good, again, good for the scene.
Put your sword down and just do this, and it's like you're going to basically punch him in the face. So the next time that I see you, you've made absolute mincemeat of him. We managed to find all these really interesting references and places where we could build the story and make spectacle and keep it about the characters, because in the end, no one cares about, you know, Wildling number 6 dying. What they care about is Jon going to survive or not, and is he going to whip Ramsay's ass?
Bit higher, Kit, bit higher.
We actually spent an entire day, 10 hours, with Kit on top of Ewan, beating him. And I just shot it from every single angle I possibly could.
I actually did punch Ewan in the face twice by accident.
Got a shield in the chin as well, which I really enjoyed. Jaw hurt a bit the next day. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things when you're doing this kind of thing, and he's got to give it that passion.
Where is he?
My hounds will never harm me.
His dogs were such a thing for him in this season and in seasons past, and such an extension of his own horrible urges and instincts and his tools of sadism and aggression in the world.
They're loyal beasts.
They were. Now they're starving.
We had to do it with dogs which are already difficult to work with, but these are dogs that are actually quite vicious, and so you can't be in the same room as them, and everyone has to clear out, and you have to use remote heads, and they're quite hardcore.
Stop! Stop!
It's such a strong moment for her because all her life she's been affected by these men who have just done such terrible things to her. This is the first moment that you actually hear her say, "This won't affect me and I'm stronger than this."
We've known for quite some time that the Mad King had planted caches of wildfire throughout the city. And when Jaime is telling Brienne the story of the last moments of the Mad King, he tells her that the wildfire was planted below, you know, the major boulevards, and he actually says below the Sept of Baelor. And Dan and I started talking about this as potentially Cersei's plan, you know, for how she finally overcomes her adversaries.
The principal idea behind it was start the sequence with a whole different bunch of people with a whole different bunch of expectations as they get ready for work one day. So the thing I really focused on is an enormous amount of details of them dressing in the morning, really abstract kind of perfume commercial style details of the lacing up the back of the gown, the putting on the crown, and they go to work and then work becomes something completely different. Trial has its own dramatic drive, which is, will he say that he's guilty or not? What will be the consequences?
I will abandon the Tyrell name and all that goes with it.
Blood knife is literally a blade with a hollowed out section. Whoever's operating it just squeezes the pump and out comes the blood.
With the carving, I had a face mold, so I went in, they molded my face, and then a prosthetic is put on.
And then I come back here and it stops there. So I'll just prick it in and then do another.
There's something wrong.
You have nothing to fear, Your Grace. The trial will begin shortly.
Marjorie is savvy regarding Cersei. Marjorie's carved a career out of being occasionally one step ahead and occasionally one step behind. She puts 2 and 2 together and makes 4 ahead of everyone else.
The trial can wait. We all need to leave.
He's overconfident. What he's doing is in the forefront of his mind. He doesn't really suspect that anyone's going to undermine him.
What we were trying to get to is the ultimate dramatic moment in that sequence when Marjorie turns to the High Sparrow, because the High Sparrow, for all of his conviction, underestimates Cersei. So we were all about, how do we get to this point where you end on a big close-up of Jonathan Pryce's face, who's so expressive, and you can see just the second before the whole place blows up that he goes, oh, shit.
Very quiet now, please, for the cues. Only Mig's voice. We're rolling. You ready for fuel? Yeah, ready. And action!
Starts off with the wildfire puddle, which is the ignition system. Then we see the barrels that are leaking. They explode, and they trigger the barrels that are all the way down the vault wall. They explode. So when we do the barrels, we've got some pyro set up. Flame always flies up towards you. So you shoot like that. We've got the flame coming up towards the camera. When you see it like that, it's flame coming down corridor towards you. And then everything else is CG King's Landing.
Everyone got really excited, you know, all the crew were like, great, we're gonna blow the scepter, we're gonna have debris, and we're gonna smash things up, it's gonna be great. And I was like, no, we're not blowing it up. And everyone was very disappointed. We filled the set with 287 extras and a light source and these big kind of things, air movers they're called, that kind of do these gusts of air. And we would do a timing, we were going 3, 2, 1, boom, and then everybody fell back. So that was as close to exploding as we got, but a majority of it, 99% of it, will all be visual effects.
Reset, rolling, set. Head back, shoulder, reset. And 3, 2, 1, go.
There'll be a shot of the High Septon getting blown up pretty good. We see it from the inside, we see it from the top.
And then we're much more structural about this falls, then this caves in, then the statues fall this way and that way. And then finally the explosion bursts out the top and out the windows.
A church bell comes flying at us and lands at the street in front of us. And then we see it, of course, from Cersei's POV and Tommen's POV from their balconies when we see this epic destruction on a grand scale. It's sort of like a nuclear explosion of sorts.
The second part of the Tower of Joy is something that hopefully answers a question that lots of people have been wondering about.
I don't want to die.
The secret she whispers into his ear just before she dies. The best way to answer that question is not to answer it. You're not going to know what she said.
Promise me, Ned.
It seemed appropriate that as Bran ends the season starting to take control of his powers, that he learned this information as he is heading south to find his family. At the same time, Jon ascends to being the true leader of the North.
I don't care if he's a bastard. Ned Stark's blood runs through his veins. He's my king, from this day until my last day.
The King in the North!
Well, we all want a leader who's going to be decent and honourable. And there's certainly 2 words that you can certainly apply to Jon Snow. He's the right man for the job. Although Sansa might have a problem with that, I fear.
He's declared king of the North, and no one even thinks, well, what about Sansa? She's actually a true Stark, and she's the one who brought in the Knights of the Vale. Maybe she deserves to be queen of the North.
That's what I love. I love that scene at the end because you really don't know where they're going to go from there. You don't know if Sansa's just going to turn on Jon or what's going to happen.
I now proclaim Cersei of the House Lannister, first of her name, Queen of the Andals and the First Men, Protector of the Seven Kingdoms.
She's finally become queen. I think the script actually really nails it and says it all. The last line in that scene says, Cersei, Queen of King's Landing and the Iron Kingdoms, whatever, invites you to all go fuck yourselves. And really, you don't really need to give any direction.
It's just shock, and he does not understand what the hell the game plan is here, because no one will accept her as queen willingly.
Probably knows better than anyone what a terrifying prospect this is for Cersei Lannister to be up there in that throne.
I'm not sure he understands, knows who that person is now. And that's scary. It's just scary.
She's capable of doing anything, as she's proven in this episode, to get what she wants. And the real question now is, what does she want?
Long may she reign.
Long may she reign.
Your reign is over.
My reign has just begun.
One, two, three.
Marine was about elegant Hollywood-style, big epic scopy dragon stuff.
There's a lot of VFX for the battle in Marine. Like a lot of VFX. Like it's most green. It's mainly green. There's a lot of green things happening.
Once Dany gets airborne on Drogon, then the only thing real in the frame is going to be Emilia. And we're throwing a lot of a very nice technology at photographing her and putting her into CG scenes in a way that should look all photographed.
It's insane. It's so good. You're like, okay, good. Because before it was just me in a green room going, woohoo! And then you see it and you're like, oh shit, I'm badass. That's awesome.
Dracarys.
The camera's following the dragon.
Exactly. Camera's following the dragon, chasing the dragon. Probably grab a look at Peter much earlier on.
He looked at me and then I looked at him.
Yeah.
He looked at me.
Okay, great. Let's try one. Checks. Let's go. Cut. Reset, please. Back to one.
The same thing went through my head when I read it as when I was doing it, which was da 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 da.
At the end of episode 10, which we call the Armada, it's very largely a CG scene, but we're shooting a lot of pieces for it.
A few actual shots of our characters, and then it's almost entirely VFX.
It needed many iterations in previs to get the beats of it right, so that Dan and David felt like it was emotional enough, it was big, and would build a tremendous level of excitement for the fans.
It was a real thrill to see her on the bow of that ship with Tyrion by her side. That was a joy to behold.
What makes it special is the 5 seasons that have gone before it. What makes it special is the investment you have in all of those characters.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, when I read that, I may have squealed out loud.
Yeah! Yes! Yeah! This is what we've been waiting for.
We're off to war with Daenerys. This is amazing.
Action!
Bring on season 7, like right now. I'll have scripts tomorrow, thank you. That's it! I can hear the music and the credits roll, and yeah, it's amazing.